And welcome to the true definition of Let's Build Your Dumpster Fire. I am your host, Brian Osa, along with your host, Brian Osa, along with your host, Brian Osa, supported here by Matthew Ruxton, Alt Ruxton, and Danielle Irvin. And today, we're going to talk about why data hygiene is important because if you don't actually clean up your properties and your system, software problems like this happen. And this equals redundancy, and this drives everyone crazy, and we shouldn't do that.
I can't handle duplicates of you guys.
Okay,
Love
I'm gonna
you.
go. I'm
Don't
going
need
to go
five
tone
of
a
you.
tone a
Love
little bit
us.
with you, but this is great.
Five's too many.
Five's too many. All right. Yeah.
Kick them out.
And just like that.
And in a very LinkedIn style parallel, clean up your duplicates. Today,
Please.
in my live stream, I learned that you should clean up your duplicates so that you don't have three clones of your friends.
Exactly. It, it is really just, it becomes such a problem. And we've been seeing so much of these conversations appearing, whether that's on LinkedIn or through organic conversation or in Slack, of just having one property that is open text that allows you to put in whatever the heck you want, which is a nightmare, having redundant properties, or I know Matthew was just sharing about how there's a nice form that's updating another form that's causing death. And
Ooh,
that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today.
yeah. Well, and I was sharing a story of a friend, but I've also seen this myself, who found that a form was overwriting a single contact. And that's a
Ooh,
messy one to get back out of. It's possible, but make sure that you don't use forms internally like that unless they're
exactly.
like meant to be used like that in the HubSpot UI, like the create a contact form. Don't use like public facing marketing forms for internal things.
Yes.
It's
So,
funny because I hear that request all the time. It's
Yeah,
like, oh,
and
my
nobody
people,
wants to do it.
I want my like salespeople to add leads when they're at like out. So can we just make like a form and then they can just put it in? And I'm like, yeah, that's called the form. But yeah, but I want to link it to this campaign. So like if I make a form, then I can link it to this campaign. And I'm like, right, but like they're still entering the person.
This feels like an opportunity to create the like super duper dumbed down version of lead entry where you create like a Google form that goes into a Google sheet and then like pushes it into HubSpot so that no one can screw anything up. Be like, you don't even have access to HubSpot anymore. You get this form and that's it.
oh,
Yeah.
honestly, that's kind of a great idea. It's a lot
Don't
of
do
work.
that.
No, it's totally a great idea. If you do that for conferences, think about it. You just have people fill out a Google form. It populates a spreadsheet, and then you have two tabs in the spreadsheet. Sheet number one, that's basically the inputted information, and sheet number two, that is the one that actually pipes into HubSpot. And in sheet number one, you can have duplicates, but it doesn't move any of those duplicates over into sheet number two, and sheet number two is what pushes into HubSpot. And
You
so
just
us
over
going
engineered the feature that HubSpot already has on duplicate matching. Because
exactly.
if you're at a conference or something and you need to have a form on like an iPad, which this was the exact example I shared with my friend yesterday,
Yeah.
there's that toggle in the form settings that says create a new contact from every submission.
Hmm.
And that is how you get around that. But if you really need to like keep people out of the mess and, put everybody in a box while you clean things up for a little while, sure, you could do like a spreadsheet import and it's a good change management tactic, I'll
Oh,
say.
I'm
Don't
completely
do
I'm
that for real
completely
though.
joking about this approach. It's just I think just us having this little bit of banter conversation is just entirely how and why these things happen. Because to your point, we've now had three different conversations about how three people who theoretically could be working in the same company are doing completely different processes that result in all this duplication efforts. And so
Yeah.
it boils down that boils down to here's how to fix it. Don't do that, please.
Yeah, just don't do that.
Like pick a source of truth, have that source be your tool, and do the same thing.
As the
And
true like operations experts that we are though, the answer is an SOP. Like you need to
yes.
have your standard operating procedure for how things get into HubSpot through different channels. If it's like tell people don't do forms. There's your whole SOP. Just don't use external facing forms.
Hmm.
But then when you have things like uh, data enrichment platforms or intelligence platforms that you subscribe to outside of HubSpot, maybe some that don't connect directly into HubSpot, like we saw yesterday, Brian.
Hmm.
You need to set a standard for what data gets moved over, how it gets in there, what gets overwritten and updated, what's the source of truth. And I can't wait to write that SOP for our client.
Yes.
They're not going to follow
Yeah.
it.
Strongly agree. And there's two parts of that SOP. Number one is everything to your point, where it needs to exist, but more importantly, it needs to exist in a written, tangible form that other people can see.
Hmm.
And step two of that is you need to circulate that as much as possible. And the best way that I can see doing that is pretty much if you're working at a company, just do a weekly internal updates communication. That's basically hey, this week we created this new SOP, we updated this SOP, this SOP is now obsolete, and there's plenty of better ways to do this, I'm sure, but just throwing a spitball, like every time you make a change like this, the most important part is communication. And make sure people see that this exists, and anytime someone tries to do something rogue, call them on it and say, no, this is the way to do it, and share that information out, but make sure it's updated.
But also, people aren't going to read your emails.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of life. Have you guys ever seen a platform that works well for this? Because there was a discussion in, I forget if it was Profoundly or Sparketeer or Let's Build, from Josh Oakes getting his hands in, I think it was Arrows for the first time. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
what? This is amazing. And I was kind of pressing him on how does this compare to some other platforms to get that in front of you. Because I think having the SOP or the guidance in the work stream. Like, no one's going to read your emails. People zone out during meetings. No one's going to remember it. They're not going
Mm-hmm.
to go find the file if they're trying to get something done for how to get it done. So, how do you communicate that in a way that is not obnoxious, but gets everybody to the same standard? And I haven't seen anything work even like 95% of the time. I've had, small teams or one to one where I'm like, you and I are defining this process because you need this outcome. And they're like, we are absolutely following the process that we're designing. Here we go.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy. But that's like 2 to 3 people that I get that to work for. When you try to roll that out across multiple teams, what actually works? I haven't seen anything yet.
I think it's interesting because tools like arrows and not sponsored, but tools like arrows work really well because they do the thing that I've said for years, which is they move the work into the place where people are doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And to some extent, like arrows does that really well because like if it creates a customer facing tool, which is what we all want that a customer can use in one central place. But as a user on the opposite side of it, as someone who's like working in HubSpot, I'm not having to go to another tool to do something. I
Mm-hmm.
can the general user can do 95% of the functionality from either app cards or following along inside of HubSpot. And like that is where I see specifically tools that are built for, if we're talking like app partners for a second, app partners that build tools for HubSpot first tend to go that route versus the ones that are like, oh, we have a Salesforce integration. Oh, I guess HubSpot's important. We should do a HubSpot integration. And it's always garbage. And it's always a sidebar card that doesn't work. Like that is like like, and I'm not naming names, but DocuSign is one of them. Like they like barely do, they do the bare minimum and legitimately had a call. We just switched from DocuSign to Panda for this exact reason because DocuSign was like, oh, we're literally not investing in HubSpot anymore. Like it's not worth it for us to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's nice for you. You won't be around for much longer then. But like it's like that's the thing that like I stress a lot with people, like when you go like when you're doing app scoping, and this is front of mind for me because I feel like I'm doing a lot of that right now. is one of the first questions I ask is, are you built for HubSpot or is HubSpot a secondary product for you?
Hmm.
Because the ones that are built for HubSpot, you can get better adoption and better understanding on, and they generally have process built into the platform people are working on. The minute you ask anyone, a sales rep, an onboarder, a support rep, a finance person to go into another tool to do something, that's when process falls apart because now they don't like it's not guided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the quick solution, like, not a quick solution, but just as we're having this conversation, the way I'm kind of thinking about this from one of the a Gen AI context, because these tools have been getting much better recently, and so you start seeing built-in browser tools like Gemini, or if you're using Brave, you have Leo, you have Copilot. HubSpot's trying to do Breeze, and the assistant model. And what I think might be the possible solution that I know doesn't exist right now, but may very well exist here in the near future, I'm just not smart enough to build it, is essentially it won't be long before every browser has a native Copilot tool, like AI tool, that's just as a pull up side option on your browser if it doesn't already exist. And with that, the hardest part about it is the context shifting, because you don't want to go back to the bot and prompt and say, hey, look, I need this, I need that, because you don't want to do it. But if you start having a tool that exists, whether that's a Chrome widget or the bot itself, that's just always open and is able to just parse what you're doing on your screen, assuming you opt into that, then that dynamically updates depending on what page you're viewing and says, hey, I see that you're on this page. Here's any SOP and related content tied to it if you have questions. And
Yep.
that becomes your new internal wiki or resource library, because then you no longer need to be searching for this stuff. It's just there. And I know there's a lot of like that's what a lot of instructional design is really built around, is just building like tooltips. And like I say this because my spouse does a lot of this, and so she uses a tool, it's called Walk Me, that's basically you go on a tool, it does like a pop-up and it shows you how to use different
Mm.
tools once you're there the first time, which is great, but you need to toggle the thing on. But if you just have that resource just openly available to you and always at your side, that largely fixes a lot of these things. But you need infrastructure. You need the infrastructure to do that, which I don't think exists yet. But maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
Well, I sometimes think about like there's the tool that comes to mind in its glorious pink variety is like there's tools like Super that do that
Mm-hmm.
to some extent, but and I've tried to use Super at two different companies. I've never got to work a way that was effective for me.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like I'm gonna get a bunch of people come at me for that. But like
We still
and
love you.
maybe
Okay.
it's fine. I don't think it's a bad product. I think
No,
that by
agreed.
any means, I think it has a function, it's serving a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But like the hardest part, A, for me is asking, I need, selfishly, like I need a tool that is going to be not expensive for my teams to operate in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the pricing is where like Super is a great tool, but I can't justify the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't justify you're making me pay per user to have something that should be free.
And then
Like,
to get everyone to install it too. Like that was the argument that
right.
we had in that thread about, what are the tools that make this work? And if
Mm-hmm.
you need to get everybody to install something new, you've got to hound people and chase them down. And even if it was a browser extension, you still have to get everybody to install it and then know that it's there and
Mm-hmm.
think about that in their work
Hashtag
stream.
HubSpot sales extension.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
struggle with that enough. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
And that only works when you're at an enterprise company or anything that has IT provisioned hardware where you're able
I've
yeah.
to
never worked
dictate
at a
what is
company
and
like
isn't
that.
installed. Yeah, most
What's
of them
Maybe
that?
don't.
once.
Yeah.
Once
I've worked with
15
some
years
Fortune
ago.
100 companies and that doesn't exist.
I
So
worked at HP and we didn't even have that.
Right. So that it basically bodes to us kind of having this silly banter conversation with without really having a, I don't think we have a solution here, but I do think our solution is that this needs to be more of a conversation, uh, with your like, with your colleagues, with your team, in order to start figuring out what this could be. Because like all great ideas, it all start like, it's not always one person who comes up with something and then runs with it. It's it's almost always a derivation of multiple ideas, or someone taking another person's idea and then another person taking that idea and actually making it happen, and going from there. We just need to do that more. And I think the best first step for that is just stop making your internal SOPs under lock and key. Just start sharing some.
Put them everywhere.
Yeah, just share them out, as long as it doesn't contain the proprietary information, because then we can all get better and we can stop reinventing wheels.
What was that magical homepage thing we saw in our HubSpot partner conversation? It was
Ah,
like a Google Chrome homepage with everything bookmarked. If you could hack that, I mean, it's another thing you have to get people to install, but
Well,
yeah,
I mean, if you have workspace, you have essentially, it's not called intranet, but like you essentially have like an intranet variety. If you have a Google Workspace account, you have the ability to do an intranet.
hmm,
mm,
But again, it's no different than having a Google Doc. Like you people still
yeah.
have to go to there. That
right,
that is the behemoth problem is we need an app partner who can figure out how to solution like make tooltips actionable in a different way
yep,
instead of HubSpot. Like where you could say, I want a tooltip on this property that like links out to a document that you can click to open. Like the minimal amount of barriers to get people to read that document.
hmm,
Are we building a software company, guys?
Maybe we are.
I think
right,
we are.
I think we
yeah.
are.
So,
All
but
right,
The only way
we
to
have
make
to
money
go,
in this
Brian.
country.
yeah, right.
Truly.
But that's really it for, that's where we're at for our discussion. And so there's so much more that this can be, and we encourage you to just keep talking about it. And if you have
Yeah.
ideas, share them with us. We can talk about them, and we'll figure this out together.
I will invest $1 in anyone's idea.
One whole dollar, maybe more if Arrow sponsors
Maybe.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
350.
Again, not sponsored.
That's
Exactly.
sponsored.
But until
Yay.
next week, enjoy keeping the fire burning, and we will catch you soon. Everything
Yay.
about that one was so awkward and abrupt, but I need to go run to a meeting that I
All
am
good.
leading.